Welcome. So if you haven't done it already, remember we got the sign-up sheets for students. We've got the sign-up sheets for people who aren't taking this class and who have come here to hear tonight's talk. This is the last in what I think has been really a remarkable set of wonderful lectures which showcase the amazing work that people in Montana and in several cases outside of Montana are doing in the area of global health. So I want to remind you, if you haven't turned your 2 papers in yet, time is running out. I think most of you have, but there's still a few I'm waiting for, so make sure you've got 2 in to me. And the other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank Gail Pullman for her help in pulling together some of the lectures that were presented as part of this lecture series. So tonight, in that mode of really amazing stories of people who are doing wonderful things around the world, we have Lisa Fleischer presenting to us on the topic of healthcare delivery challenges in Santa Lucia. Dr. Fleischer has been practicing family medicine in Northwest Montana for about 30 years. Her career started in the Mission Valley, where she was employed by Nine Pike Clinic, Lake County Family Planning, the Indian Health Service, and the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. Since 1997, she's worked in the Flathead Valley, employed by the Kalispell Regional Health Care Center. In 2001, she and her family began volunteering at St. Jude Hospital in Santa Lucia in the West Indies. They have returned annually to volunteer for between 1 and 5 months. Dr. Fleischer helped found and lead Hewanawara Health Volunteers, a 501c3 dedicated to supporting St. Jude Hospital. She has also been active with the Global Health Division of the American Academy of Family Physicians. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Fleischer.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is not a formal lecture. This is also not about my work specifically in St. Lucia. It's really more my observations about how complex healthcare administration, delivery, and healthcare issues are in St. Lucia. In the 16 years I've been working there, I've become more familiar with both the system and the health problems, the culture, and how they all interact. And so this was an opportunity to try to formulate my thoughts and actually do a little research about the system. As Peter said, I started going there in 2001 after a couple of years of research to find a spot that would work for myself and my family. My children were 7 and 11 at the time. We've continued to go back every year for a month or so. We were part of a volunteer program that was quite well developed, and there were dozens of people who came on a regular basis, usually spending about a month volunteering. And so after our first year, where we'd spent 3 months, we went back every year for about a month. As my children got older, it got a little complicated during high school, but we kept going. And then in 2009, once our children were off doing their own lives, we purchased a house in St. Lucia. So now we live there part-time. I have a job in Kalispell now where I do fill-in work for other providers. So that gives me the freedom to come and go a little more easily. And so this year was our longest time there. We spent 5 months and thought maybe that would cure us of wanting to be there. But in fact, we almost missed our plane because we didn't want to come back. And the weather was much better there, as you can see. So that's a little bit of my story there. I'm a family physician, primarily in St. Lucia. I work in the outpatient setting. In Kalispell, I'm doing more inpatient medicine. But I decided for free I didn't need to do nights and weekends anymore. I've done plenty of those. So I work in both St. Jude Hospital, which I'll describe a little bit what that entity is, and then I also work at a community health center when I'm down there. So I'm going to talk about 2 major categories of things. I'm going to describe the system itself, some of its strengths, some of its idiosyncrasies and its limitations, and then I'll talk about patients and the kind of health problems that are in St. Lucia and how we attempt to deal with them and why that's in some ways easier, in some ways more difficult. So St. Lucia is an island nation. They are an independent country since 1979. The population is about 185,000 people, though depending on what source you look at, it's anywhere from 165 to 185,000. I suspect that a significant percentage of those people, I'd say tens of thousands, are off island, working in countries like Great Britain and Canada and the United States, because there's a lot of unemployment in St. Lucia and wages are very low. The landmass is 238 square miles. And how I like to describe it to people in Montana is you take the population of northwest Montana, say Flathead and Lake counties, and you put it in Flathead Lake. That's St. Lucia. You surround it by an ocean. If you're going to Flathead Lake, you can drive there. There's all kinds of roads going in all directions. But in order to get to St. Lucia, you really have to fly, and that's expensive. So that makes the situation somewhat unique. Everything that they can't produce in St. Lucia has to be imported, either by sea or by air freight. So that is expensive as well. As far as sources of income, when we started going to St. Lucia in 2001, the leading source of income for the nation was agriculture. They had a really good trade deal with the European Union for sale of their bananas, but they lost that arrangement. And so agriculture has declined, and now tourism is the #1 industry. And that's taken its toll as far as health, as I'll discuss later. The next source of income is offshore banking. And that's a whole other topic, but it is pretty interesting to see what's happening with things like citizenship by investment, which the new government that was elected last summer is really pushing for. So basically, you can get a passport for $250,000 of investment in some enterprises that seem likely to be nothing but places people are hiding their money. So it's kind of a house of cards. Has anybody here been to St. Lucia? No? For a number of years, and I don't know if this is still true, it was the #1 destination for honeymoons in the world. And that was good for their tourist industry. One flight I took down there, the stewardess said, "Raise your hands if you're on your honeymoon." And pretty much the entire airplane raised their hands. So she said, "Okay, if you're not on your honeymoon, raise your hands." There were 8 of us who were not on our honeymoon. And there's a little bit of light manufacturing, and agriculture is about #3. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I went down on my view, but not yours. Okay, this was Independence Day, which is February 22nd, I think. Big party. Okay, a little bit about the healthcare system itself. Hold on a second. I just need to. So this picture I took a couple of years ago, I think is kind of a metaphor for a lot of things in St. Lucia. The truck in front is the one being towed, actually. Not exactly how I saw somebody coming off the highway, coming into Missoula. Usually the towed truck is in the back, but in St. Lucia, you're going downhill, you just have a rope that you've tied on your vehicle. So you got to change the towing depending on whether you're going up a hill or down a hill. The vehicle you're towing seems of debatable, value. And in the healthcare arena, I think a lot of times there are things like technology that are steering the ship, not necessarily in a direction that makes sense. So that was my little metaphor picture. The other thing that this picture brings up in my mind is the resiliency of St. Lucians. And I think this is probably true in developing countries all over the world. Because everything is not handed to them on a silver platter, they don't have desks that are all smooth and even and chairs that are attached, and you can't buy the number of screws you want to finish a project at one hardware store. So they are quite resilient. They're able to MacGyver or jerry-rig, whatever you want to call it, just about anything to make it work. And that's true in the healthcare sector as well. So St. Lucia's got a system kind of like the United States. It's a mishmash. There's some public sector, there's some private sector. There is not a universal healthcare system, even though they're closest to Great Britain as far as their past. They're part of the Commonwealth, but they do not have universal coverage. And there's a thriving or a growing private sector that, as in America, is taking full advantage of capitalist opportunities for entrepreneurs who happen to have degrees of various sorts. So the public system is run by the Ministry of Health. There are 13 districts in St. Lucia when voting happens, and there's 13 ministers elected to their parliament. Each minister gets a ministry. So the helm of the Ministry of Health is run by somebody from whichever government is in power, who's been elected. That doesn't mean they have any background in health. And they often don't. They have a bureaucracy, of course, under them of some people with some experience, but whenever the government changes, there's a fair amount of change in the people who work in that bureaucracy. The country is divided into 33 health districts, each of which has a health center, a community health center. So I work at one in a little fishing village of a few thousand people, and this is the staff there. They had actually made me a little farewell meal one day. The health centers are run by nurses, RNs. Many of them have public health degrees. In addition, some of them are advanced nurse practitioners, advanced family nurse practitioners. Some of them are midwives. And they're there, they staff it 5 days a week, pretty much 9 to 5. They do home visits. They do immunizations. They do contraception. They do pap smears, pelvic exams, pregnancy tests, education, community outreach. They have health aides. They go out into the community as well and do things like take vitals, check blood sugars for homebound, disabled, or senior people. There is a national hospital in the capital. It has been under construction for 10 years. And I want to talk a little bit about the National Hospital in Castries because that's an example of the challenges in their healthcare system. So of the population of 185,000 people, a third live in the capital. Probably half the population lives in the north. The other half is more rural in the south, which is where I work and live. So 20 years ago, the government started to plan a new national hospital. It took them 10 years to come up with a plan and come up with the financing for that hospital. It took them 10 years, additional years, to build it. And it's allegedly completely ready to be used, maybe minus a little bit of equipment. There's enough equipment in there that they have to keep it air conditioned all the time, which is costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, US. But they still haven't moved in. And why? There's lots of speculation about why. So that's a problem. They've been operating out of an old hospital since then that's nearby, but they have invested a lot of money in this big infrastructure. It's a modern hospital, but they're still not using it. And then also Golden Hope is an inpatient psychiatric facility that's also in the north, and that is part of the government system as well. They don't really have any kind of outpatient residential facilities for the mentally ill. There are 2 nursing homes that I'm aware of on the island that I believe may be connected to the government as well. But for the most part, there's no safety net like that. People either are on the street or their family takes care of them. Private sector. The private sector has definitely been expanding in my period of time there, and that's because there was a push for a number of years back in the late 90s and prior decade by Cuba to train physicians for St. Lucia. And so there was about 10 years where every year about 15 Lucians got to go to Cuba and go to medical school. It was a 6-year program. They do not speak Spanish. They went back and forth between France and England 14 times, and the English were the last victors. So the first thing they had to do was learn Spanish. and they learned medicine in Spanish. So they came back to St. Lucia and without advanced training. So they completed medical school, but they didn't get residency training. The government employed them at the National Hospital and also at St. Jude's Hospital, which I'll talk about next, for a year or a few years. And then some of them just started working in health centers, some of them opened their own practices, and some of the most ambitious ones managed to get in off island, either in the US, Canada, or Great Britain, typically for advanced training. Actually, one of the St. Lucian physicians from St. Jude's completed a 5-year ER residency in Israel, in Tel Aviv, which was fortunate. But there are quite a few physicians in St. Lucia who don't have any kind of advanced or specialty training. There are also private businesses that have labs. There's private imaging facilities. And there's a private hospital also in the north, that's Tapion Hospital. And it's quite expensive, but they do have various specialties represented there. Many of the physicians who work there also work in their private offices, and some of them work in the public sector as well. There's a fair amount of fluidity. There are many physicians who get paid to work in the public hospitals part-time and then have their private practices part-time, which are more lucrative. Other sources of private sector healthcare are the internet. Aleutians have become connected in the 16 years I've been going there. The first year we had to go into town and pay by every 5 minutes to get on the internet. Now everybody's got a cell phone, maybe they don't all have minutes. There's very good connectivity, and people, as in America, are starting to look things up before they go to the doctor. And then there are a variety of alternative practitioners in St. Lucia. Bush medicine is something that a lot of people use. That's herbal medicine. There are also people who do what I would call massage. They rub people. So one of the physical practices that they do there for musculoskeletal problems is what they call soft candle. So they have somebody rub soft wax onto the part that's uncomfortable. So there's that as well. St. Jude Hospital. So St. Jude Hospital is how I became introduced to St. Lucia. The hospital, the original hospital, which is on the left, was built during World War II by the United States government. It was intended to be a hospital for wounded soldiers from North Africa. It was intended to be built on another island, I believe Trinidad, but the code names for St. Lucia and the other island where the hospital was supposed to be built were Lawn and Dawn. And in classic style, they delivered all the materials to the wrong island, which was St. Lucia, and they decided, well, all the stuff's here, we might as well build the hospital. So they built the hospital. Well, it was on Lucian time, so by the time they got the hospital done, the war was over. So the hospital was left, it was never used, and it overgrew with vegetation. And in the 60s, a group of Catholic nuns who were working in St. Lucia doing charity work felt that the population in the southern part of the island was really very deprived of health care. The distance between north and south is not very far. It's like the length of Flathead Lake, but the road is like the going to the Sun Highway in Glacier. It's steep, mountainous road, and so it's not that easy to get up north. So the US government sold the hospital to St. Lucia for $1, and the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother opened it up as a charity hospital. And they had affiliations with a variety of US-based organizations such as Mercy Medical Corporation, Loyola University Medical School, and Health Volunteers Overseas as ways to recruit physicians and other healthcare providers to volunteer. Unfortunately, in 2009, there was a fire at the hospital that started in the operating room at 1 in the morning, and 4 people were killed, and the hospital had to be evacuated. And within, I think, 48 hours, they had moved to what they call the George Odlum Hospital. It was a stadium, a track and field stadium built by the Chinese in 2004, pictured on the right. The hospital, there's 2 sets of bleachers. This is the east side, and on the west side, there's a similar set, and the hospital became incorporated into the rooms underneath the bleachers. The bleachers have since completely fallen apart. Some of the roofing, which you can see through on the top there, has fallen off, so the whole thing is completely unsafe. All of the plumbing fixtures are in complete disarray. In 12 years, the facility is just really just about disintegrated. They were supposed to have a regional track and field event there in 2017, but they had to cancel it, partly because the hospital still hasn't moved out and partly because the facility is in such bad shape. So I told you the story about the National Hospital, partly because there was a project 20 years and it still hasn't been completed. This fire in 2009 was not planned. So they did a really marvelous job of relocating themselves to the stadium, but it is not really a healthcare facility with a lot of longevity. And coming up with a plan to remodel the old facility was complicated. They had an initial plan that didn't work out. They've gotten $120 million from some Taiwanese missionaries to complete the hospital, but unfortunately the funds did not all go to their directed purpose, and so the facility is closer to being done, but not, actually there is one operational building that was donated by the Mexican government. They insisted that there's a, I can't remember the name of it, the United Nations has a division that does projects overseas in the health, I think in healthcare, and the Mexican government insisted that this UN division oversee the completion of the facilities that they were donating money for, and so those actually were completed, pretty much completed, and the only building that is actually ready to go is the morgue, first things first. So I actually think they are going to start using the morgue, even though it's off, a few miles away, it's off-site. But there's a new government that came in July. There's a new, the hospital board changed over too, and they're all rah-rah about getting it done, but I think the money continues to be a problem. So St. Jude's Hospital is not really a public hospital or a private hospital. It's a unique entity. When the St. Lucia government ultimately took it over from the charity organizations, but they statutorized it, which I'm really not exactly sure what it means, but it's kind of like a private nonprofit. The government regulates it. The government provides funding that covers salaries, but the rest of their expenses they have to meet with revenue. That hasn't worked out super well because people don't have a lot of money to pay for health care, as I'll talk about. So they've also not hired competent managers, so it's not really been fiscally sound since the nuns left. So that's a problem. Before I go on, I want to talk a little bit about healthcare providers on the island. I meant to cover that in the private sector. So by 2015 estimates, there are about 150, I'd say 160 plus doctors on the island. About a third of those are GPs. Some of them are practicing within settings like the health center, St. Jude's Hospital, the National Hospital. Some have private practices. There are 10 OBGYNs, and these numbers are estimates off the St. Lucia Medical Dental Council website. 5 surgeons, 5 anesthesiologists, 3 psychiatrists, 4 ophthalmologists, and then 1 to 3 in each of the various medical specialties, including ENT, cardiology, pathology, rheumatology, dermatology. There's a neurosurgeon. There are 3 urologists. And they have residency training overseas, all the specialists from somewhere. There's nowhere in St. Lucia to go to medical school or to get advanced training. The University of the West Indies has campuses in Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad, but they're not that easy to get into. You can get a certificate in family medicine that takes 3 years, and you can do that while you're working in St. Lucia, but you have to pay to get that certificate. And it's pretty difficult. One of my colleagues completed the entire course, passed her written exam, flew to Barbados for her oral exam, did not pass the oral exam. She spent 3 years, a lot of money, and never got her certificate. Very disappointing. So there's not a lot of great options for training on the island. There are physical therapists, limited number of physical therapists on the island, podiatrist, I think there's one podiatrist. There is a nursing school on the island, so they can train nurses locally, which is important, though I think they have to get advanced degrees. They can do that, so a lot of that online. So financing. So the sources of payment for healthcare in St. Lucia, it's primarily self-pay. Some employers have private insurance, offer private insurance, but if you have private insurance and you go to see a healthcare provider, you have to pay up front, and then you submit your claim to the insurance company and you get reimbursed yourself. There isn't third-party billing done by the healthcare organization. There is some free care available at government entities. The National Hospital and the health centers provide much of their services for free. At the health centers, it's primarily a nurse. Most health centers have a doctor 1 day a week, and that's free. A couple of the bigger urban health centers will have a doctor 2 or 3 days a week. They also have sexually transmitted disease clinics, prenatal clinics, pediatric clinics, well child clinics, immunization clinics. So those basic primary care services can be acquired pretty much for free, though, for example, contraception, you can get contraception at the health center, but you still do have to pay a small fee. The average St. Lucian spends the equivalent of $698 US per year. That's 6.7% of GDP, compared to the USA, where the statistic is up to 10,000. We're each spending $10,000 a year. Not sure necessarily for better value. What does it cost? So at the health center, if you just go in to see the doctor to renew your blood pressure medicines, you don't have to pay anything for the doctor visit. If you come to see me at St. Jude's Hospital, you pay 15 EC, which is about $7 US. If you go to a doctor in the private sector, you're probably paying anywhere from 60 to 150 EC dollars, so 5-6 times that. And the farther up you go to the private hospital, you're going to pay more. You see the specialist, you're going to pay more, and it's coming out of pocket. Lab tests, I think to get CBC, which is a check of your white and red blood cells, probably costs about $7, $10. A urine test about the same. As the tests get more complex, the cost goes up. Okay, does anybody have any question about the system itself? And talk a little bit about the patients. So the immunization rate in St. Lucia is very high. I suspect it's as high as the United States. They report, there's these Millennium Development Goals, you're probably familiar with that the World Health Organization has created. One of them is 100% measles immunization by, I think it was 2015. St. Lucia claims to have achieved that. The public health nurses in the health centers, they know their communities. They go out and give the immunizations in the people's homes if they're not compliant and come in. Is it 100%? I doubt it's 100%, but they've done well with immunizations. They don't have all the immunizations that we have. Flu shots are not readily available. Chickenpox vaccination is not readily available. Pneumonia vaccine is probably not available for free, but is available. And you can get a flu shot, but you have to pay for it. But the basic childhood DPT, MMR, polio vaccinations are all available. Hepatitis B, I believe, too. Life expectancy. Oh, another Millennium Development Goal is in-hospital deliveries. And they report, this is on the World Health Organization website, 98% of their deliveries are in a hospital. There's 3 hospitals where you can have a delivery: the National Hospital, Tapion Hospital, and then in the southern end of the island, St. Jude Hospital. And actually, the night they had the fire, there was a baby born. And they had immediately evacuated to a secondary school because that was the closest large facility. They moved all the patients there, and there was a baby born at the secondary school, which is like high school here. And I think they do about 800 deliveries a year at St. Jude's. Life expectancy is not all that different from the United States. Healthy life expectancy, that's the amount of time that you're alive but you're not sick, is about 12 years less. So you can do the math. So what does that tell us? You know, that tells us that what's happening in the developing world is that what's killing people anymore is not childhood diseases and infectious diseases because of potable water, immunization, and improved sanitation. The life expectancy in the world has increased dramatically. I'm sure you've learned that in your studies. So what does that leave us with? Chronic diseases. Chronic diseases are becoming the #1 health issues worldwide now, and that's readily apparent in St. Lucia, and it's changed dramatically in the time I've been there. Contraception is better also. Women, I mean, St. Lucia was a largely Catholic country where women were having quite a few babies, and that's changed dramatically. St. Jude's Hospital's changed dramatically. It was a Catholic hospital when I started there. There was no contraceptive services provided. Now it's full spectrum, and they're placing IUDs. The birth rate's dropping, and the age of the population is increasing. So the other thing that's happening is that the lifestyle is changing. People are no longer primarily working in the agricultural sector where they're getting lots of physical activity. They have more sedentary jobs in hotels, sitting at desks, working for car agencies, working at the airport. And so there's also more private transportation available, more private vehicles. The Japanese have been working hard to import vehicles into St. Lucia. There's a lot more cars on the road, less people are walking and taking public transportation. Because of economic realities, when there's a couple in the family or the extended family living together, everybody's working. So there's not as much leisure time for recreation. Same kind of things that have happened in America. So, you know, now what we're seeing is hypertension, diabetes, strokes, heart disease, cancer. Obesity is increasing. Now this data that the numbers I'm going to show you the next few slides, I know are a couple years old. So figure that the numbers are higher. So statistic I got off of, I think actually this was World Health too. In St. Lucians over 20, 32% of women are obese. It is amazing the number of women in St. Lucia with polycystic ovary syndrome. That again has become epidemic. That's also contributing to the drop in birth rate because many women with polycystic ovary syndrome are not very fertile. There's a direct correlation between weight and polycystic ovary syndrome, and weight loss is the #1 treatment. But men too are gaining weight and becoming more sedentary. Hypertension. 37% of men over 25 years of age are diagnosed with hypertension in St. Lucia. 27% of women over 25. You go up over 50, the numbers are much higher. The height of the blood pressure that we see in St. Lucia, I mean, most typically at an outpatient clinic, a third of the patients I'm seeing who are there for high blood pressure, their pressure, if they were in America, they'd be in the ER. Well, we can't do that in St. Lucia. I'm going to talk about health literacy a little bit in a little bit more detail, but with chronic diseases are not something that people in St. Lucia know about. It's all very new, and the people who are getting chronic diseases, the middle-aged and the elderly, these people, when they were children, people didn't take medicine every day forever. So the kind of medicines they were exposed to primarily was antibiotics. You go to the doctor, you're sick, they give you a medicine, you take it for a week, and then you're better, and you go along with your life. The concept of taking a pill every day for the rest of your life is not something that people in St. Lucia are at all enthusiastic about or appreciate. So there is a fair amount of noncompliance. And I think some of it's lack of education and some of it is, I guess, cultural. People are not really enthusiastic about medicine like we are in the modern world. The high blood pressure is an issue for young women. It's affecting reproductive health as well. It limits your contraceptive options. It increases the risk of high-risk pregnancies with complications. Diabetes. Diabetes has actually gotten more press in St. Lucia for some reason than hypertension. I think it's because the rates have been going up so rapidly recently and there's a lot of publicity about it. It goes with obesity. I want to tell you a little story about this bread. This is delicious, lovely French bread. And it's from a bakery called Madame Popo's. So the first year we went to St. Lucia, we had our 8 suitcases full of stuff. We get bundled in the middle of the night, and there's all these volunteers at the hospital. They have housing on site. And they said, everybody welcomed us in and helped us get settled. And the next night they said, we're going to the bakery. Do you want to go? Yeah, we want to go to the bakery. So in my mind, I'm envisioning a bakery with, you know, the glass shelves, and you've got your nice little muffins and cookies and all that stuff behind the glass shelf. So we go walking out of the hospital gate. It's a gated, locked, secure environment. We go walking off into the community in the dark on this windy road, turn at the Budweiser sign down this little lane, and it's dark, and here's the bakery. It's this clay oven, and they make the most delicious baked goods. Bread is a big part of the diet in St. Lucia. The rate of the diabetes rate is increasing dramatically. There's a lot of public awareness, and people are getting their blood sugars checked. It's starting young. Just, you know, as you saw with the obesity statistic, they go hand in hand. So, you know, what do you do? What do you do about diabetes, hypertension, and obesity? Because those are really the 3 big health issues that are affecting the modern population in St. Lucia and the developing world and the developed world. Well, clearly the data all shows that lifestyle intervention is the most effective treatments. We're not very successful in America with that, so really we're not the ones who should be spreading the word. Fortunately, I think Lucians are way more motivated to do lifestyle interventions, I think because they're not very motivated around medications. So fortunately, I think that's one of the strengths of the country is that they're naturally fairly skeptical about taking too many medications. But their modern lifestyle is changing in a way that, just like here, makes it difficult for people. There are a few particular areas that are concerning. Children's diets, and I see this in the States. Parents tell me, oh, my kid won't eat anything, and all they want to eat is junk food. And I say, well, who's the parent? I hear that same story in St. Lucia. Well, all they eat is junks. Junks, that's what they call it. They got vendors selling junk food right outside all the schools. And parents send their kids to school with money, they buy a bunch of junk, and they eat it. And it's just as bad for them there as it is here. The other health concern that's been voiced is the use of chemicals in agriculture. And you know, a lot of the chemicals that are banned from use in countries like the United States are still being produced and sold overseas where there's not regulation. And the cancer incidence is going up dramatically in St. Lucia, whether that's because people are living longer, whether it's because of chemicals, whether it's because of genetics, whether it's because of increased diagnostics. It's probably a combination of all of those. I want to talk a little bit about the diet in St. Lucia. When you don't have a lot of money, carbohydrates are what you eat because carbohydrates are cheap. And there are a variety of root crops they call ground provisions, which are widely abundant in St. Lucia, and people grow them, but you can also go out in the woods and dig them up. They're very dense carbohydrates. People also eat a lot of rice and a lot of bread. That is the core of most people's diet. Most people get up in the morning, they have a cup of tea with sugar, they love sugar, and they have some bread or some porridge. They have their big meal in the middle of the day. Their big meal consists of possibly a small portion of chicken, fish, or pork, and some ground provisions, rice, beans, sometimes bread. Lentils, they use a lot too. There's increasingly more fried food. The first fast food chain that came to St. Lucia was Kentucky Fried Chicken. They were there. They've been there ever since I've been going there. They've gotten a few others. They got Domino's Pizza now too. But there's lots of people doing fried chicken. They supposedly eat more chicken per capita than any country in the world, which I believe. They eat a lot of chicken. And there's a lot more fried chicken. There's something called bakes, which are fried dough, like fry bread. That's a common meal, fried chicken with some fry bread. Sugary drinks are abundant. Children drink a lot of them. Adults drink a lot of them. That's all news since I've been going there. People are still growing vegetables, but they're not as widely abundant as you would think, and they're more expensive than ground provisions for sure. So we're working hard to get people to eat more vegetables. Fishermen often eat a healthier diet, I'd say. They've got some other health challenges. We don't see as much true type 2 diabetes in fishermen. And there is a lot of fruit available, but of course with diabetes you have to limit the amount of fruit you eat also. So that is a bit of a problem. So helping people adjust their diet in St. Lucia is challenging because of the economics of it. Of course, eating less in general is cheaper, but you do have to eat something. There's also quite a high preponderance of adult onset insulin-dependent diabetic, thin people who develop diabetes later in life. That's a different pathology than people who get it in association with excessive weight, and probably is due to excessive carbohydrate in the diet and genetics. Activity. People used to walk everywhere, and there still are many people who do. The island is ringed by one road, and there's some roads coming in from the sides, but people who don't have their own transportation often have to walk to get a public transport, which they use mostly vans that hold about a dozen people. But people don't walk as much as they used to. People have more private vehicles. People don't do as much agriculture as they used to. And I would say in general, it's not a culture where people do sports for fun, though there is some. There's a soccer league on the island. There's cricket, which is probably not a huge amount of exertion. A surprisingly few people swim, despite being surrounded by water. The roads are not very safe for riding a bicycle. Kids do athletics in school for sure, and they do plenty of PE. And there is some dance. But there are gyms now. The hospital has a track, so people come there to walk, which is great. We like to encourage that. But often people don't have a lot of leisure time, and exercise isn't necessarily their go-to activity. But walking is readily available. So, to summarize, I think the strengths of the St. Lucian system are the health centers, which at least provide basic primary care for low or no cost. Some people don't like to utilize the health centers because they feel that they want more privacy in these small communities, but I think the health centers are an excellent place to start. I will also add that they do have a rudimentary electronic health record that they use at the 33 health centers. None of the hospitals have gotten an electronic health record yet. I don't know about the private sector. But they're using their electronic health record to track data, particularly on hypertension and diabetes. There's public health messaging, and they've used that pretty successfully. When chikungunya first came to the Caribbean about 4 years ago, the Pan American Health Organization had sent word around to the region and put out educational materials so that the healthcare providers and the public would be prepared. And they really did an excellent job, once chikungunya did hit the island, of spreading the word about who should come in, who shouldn't come in, what you could do, and they really had a fairly coordinated public health response. They've done the same thing with Zika. They've done the same thing with HIV. So they do have some basic public health system in place, which they're starting to use to provide education about diabetes and high blood pressure. There are non-governmental organizations that have a presence in St. Lucia. The Pan American Health Organization is one. The Organization for Eastern Caribbean States is just starting to develop a health division that's actually going to be run by the recent Chief Medical Officer of St. Jude's. The Peace Corps has a large presence in St. Lucia. I've been told that it was the first country that actually had Peace Corps volunteers, and I think there's usually about 30 on island, and many of them work in the health sector. I think the traditional values of St. Lucians, which focus on family, faith, and I guess a natural approach to health, I think is helpful too. They're also exceedingly respectful of authority and will listen to authority figures. They're still operating under the paternalistic model of healthcare, which has its advantages from the provider perspective. I like to educate patients, but it's refreshing when people heed your advice and don't argue and tell you their cousin said that they shouldn't do that, or they saw it on the internet. And then the other advantage that they have is they can get real-world examples from cultures where we've gotten way behind the curve with these chronic diseases and are spending 18% of our GDP just taking care of people with preventable health problems. Maybe not 18% are preventable, but a significant number. Weaknesses, they don't have enough money to do what they want to do. The public system is a perfect example. They've got two hospitals. Their two main hospitals are not functional. It's fairly major. There's low health literacy. People do not understand things like germs. And so it's interesting to try to explain things to people who aren't aware of some of those terms. That is changing, and people certainly are accessing sources for healthcare. Younger people are better educated. They're a heavily bureaucratic society. It is very hard to make change in their society. And just when a bureaucracy gets going, they have an election and all the people change over. That can be frustrating. Technology. Acquisition of technology is expensive. Maintenance of technology is often impossible because they don't have people adequately trained in things like biomed. They don't have the money to purchase reagents. That was an ongoing problem at St. Jude Hospital. They had the machine to run chemistries, but because they had not paid their bills to the suppliers, they couldn't actually use the machine because they didn't have the reagent to run the test. They didn't have the foresight to order it further ahead. They don't budget by departments, so it's money in, money out. They don't have a modern financial system in their healthcare sector, so that's difficult. Human resources are often undertrained and not very regulated. So there's a vast array of types of practice that are happening. And I'd like to give an example of a patient I saw shortly before I left in March. 24-year-old woman, otherwise healthy. She had felt nauseated and a little dizzy for one day. She went to a doctor in her local community. He ordered a few $100 EC, so probably more than $100 US worth of tests on her, gave her an antibiotic, a reflux drug, and an anti-nausea drug. He couldn't do any of the tests at his office, so the next day, she went home and took the medicines. That made her throw up and have diarrhea and get a stomachache. The next day she came to St. Jude Hospital, where I was working that day, to get the blood work done. Well, they couldn't run all the tests because the chemistry analyzer wasn't working, so they only ran the cholesterol panel and the CBC. He had also ordered a full metabolic workup, liver, kidney function tests, thyroid tests, and a urinalysis. The only test he didn't order, which was the only test I would have ordered, was a pregnancy test, though she had assured me she just had a period a few days before. The lab work that was done was normal, and I had seen about 4 people with the same symptoms in the previous week. It was a virus, I was pretty sure. So she spent probably, with the medicines and everything, probably close to $200 US for a little viral gastroenteritis. That was money, and the only reason she ended up seeing me was her mother came with her, and her mother was very skeptical about the whole plan. She didn't want her to get the blood work done. She didn't seem that sick to the mother. She'd thrown up a couple of times and had a bout of diarrhea and felt a little off balance. But the patient insisted on having the lab work done, and I don't know who paid for it, one of the two of them. So they have all this technology. Doctors often order a lot of tests indiscriminately. I don't know if that's self-serving. I mean, in this case, he wasn't making any money off of it if it's out of ignorance. This is one example, but I've seen many similar examples over the years. So having the technology, having the trained clinicians, and having patients who are seeking help doesn't always add up to being a very logical conclusion. This is the west side of the hospital, where they had to block off the entrance because of the plastic falling off the roof for a while. Other assets. So what do volunteers do? What can people from other countries do? Honestly, the more time I go on, the more time I spend there, and the more complex I see, the more I learn of the complexities of the situation, the less I think I can really do from a systematic perspective. I feel like some of you may know this story of the guy walking on the beach and throwing starfish back in the sea, and the guy who's walking with him says, well, you're never going to help all those starfish. What you're doing doesn't make a difference. And the guy says, well, made a difference to that one. So I think that's the advantage of being a healthcare provider. I can make a difference to one person at a time. And so I try to keep my focus there. I also try to keep my focus on supporting my colleagues. Because there are some people there that I've been working with for quite a long time and who I'm really trying to encourage along, helping them get training, bringing them materials, getting volunteers to come and work with them. We try to do as much as we can for training. Policies is something that St. Jude's has been very fascinated with, coming up with all kinds of policies, trying to get international accreditation. Unfortunately, they've developed a lot of policies and procedures that have never actually been enacted, I think due to the heavy weight of the bureaucracy and the separation of the bureaucrats from the people actually out there doing the work. The bureaucrats are sitting in their little isolated office, writing up policies and procedures, but don't get out of their office. So maybe some of you are going to go into healthcare management, can go over there and help them. And we have had volunteers in healthcare management try to make a difference. Providing materials is great, but sustainability is a problem. So if I bring them an EKG machine, 2 years later they run out of EKG paper, that's probably going to be the end of their use of that EKG machine. So trying to build in some sustainability to the technology that we bring along. And certainly there's a lot of specialty care and specialty procedures that are not available in St. Lucia that we as volunteers and my nonprofit organization and other groups I work with, we're trying to recruit. Opportunities we're looking forward to in the future, completion of new facilities, hopefully one day. We're going to get back into the old new old hospital, yeah. Continuing to work with international organizations, that's something that St. Lucia continues to do. They just don't have much for resources on island. Staff development, and then public health messaging to try to get, to reverse this obesity epidemic that is developing. Fortunately, smoking has never really taken hold there. It's a small percentage of the population that smokes. There's alcoholism like everywhere else. There's some drug abuse. They can't really afford that. I think they can afford to eat. I think it's poor, high carb, poor quality diet that contributes a lot. You know, one of my strategies has been a longitudinal approach. So continuing to go back year after year, build relationships, and try to recruit other people to come with me. That's what I have to say. Ooh, I went over, I'm sorry. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Close. Yeah, it's just 7:35.
You mentioned early on that they saw a lot of the rises in obesity and diabetes and hypertension after the transition from an agricultural economy to a tourism economy. Do you feel like that was introduction of a lot of highly processed foods that were being imported in, and the cultures that were trying to get access to those foods as tourists on the island and make it more readily available for the islanders?
I think it more coincides with I think that's probably part of it, and it's true. You know, they cannot grow enough food to support the tourist industry. They're importing food, which is really a tragedy if you stay at a resort, because you're eating stuff imported from somewhere else, and the food that they grow locally is much better, you know, quality-wise. But I also think it has to do with imperialism, frankly. This may be a little bit political, but foreign countries are trying to sell their goods on the market, and these small countries are the market. You know, these small developing nations are the market. So I alluded to like the Japanese vehicles. The Chinese are importing a lot. I mean, there is plastic stuff everywhere from China. There are fruit drinks. There's a lot of stuff coming in from South America also, Mexico. So I think a lot of it is just the global economy. And this is what is being exported or imported into St. Lucia. And you know, I mean, they should tax the sugary beverages. That would help, because a few years ago, I think 4 years ago, they had no sales tax at all. They put in an 18% sales tax. They started right from zero. That was ridiculous. But people still buy this stuff. Prices went up dramatically. I think the other piece of the tourist industry, if you're a farmer and you're farming up in the hills, you eat what you're growing. You don't go to town very often. I mean, you might go to get some chemicals, you might go, I don't know why you'd go to town. I mean, a lot of times, like, somebody's farming and somebody else goes to market and sells the stuff, so maybe they'd be in town. But if you're working in the tourist industry, you gotta get up early, you gotta walk down, you gotta get on a transport, you gotta ride your transport to wherever you're working, the resort, and then you gotta get back on and ride back, and you don't have time to cook. And so you stop, and there's people along the side of the road selling a piece of chicken and, you know, a soft drink, and I think it's going from a subsistence economy to a cash economy, and then you don't have you're not eating where you work, and you're having to pay cash, and you're buying quick, easy stuff. I mean, even like I see the doctors at the hospital. I mean, they all buy junks. I mean, they buy fried chicken and stuff like that at the hospital, though the hospital cafeteria serves a pretty healthy meal. Yeah.
Just considering that this is sort of an add-on, but considering all of the marketing as well as the additional costs that's contributed, or the additional cost of eating healthy, like what kind of messages do you find are effective in actually getting people to change their behavior?
Well, I try to find out who's cooking, what are they cooking, what are they eating to start with. And so it depends a little bit. A lot of people will have a kitchen garden for vegetables. I mean, people are getting the message, lettuce, cucumber, tomato, and a lot of people eat that for breakfast, actually. cucumber and tomato. They eat vegetables for breakfast. So that's good. So I try to build on that. And then I talk about something called the plate method. So is anybody familiar with the plate method? It's a diabetic counseling tool. So you take your plate and you divide it. I mean, what you're supposed to tell people is you divide the plate in half. Half the plate's supposed to be vegetables, a quarter carbohydrates, and a quarter some kind of protein, meat, chicken, fish, beans. I usually will say a third, because I think that's more realistic there. And I talk to them. I mean, it's sort of same thing you do with people here. You have to figure out where they're coming from. What are they able to do? So what little steps could you do? What vegetables do you like? What vegetable can you get? Could you grow this? And then just trying to get them to cut back on to eat less. I mean, if they're obese, they can evidently get away with doing less. And I'm pretty hard on the sugary beverages. That's not a food group. It's not in food group. So
I've got two quick questions for you. I know we're running out of time, but one is, you talked a lot about payment. I'm sure it's hard for a lot of people to afford some of the payments that you talked about. Is there any talk about microinsurance schemes? Is that something you've thought about in this context? And my other question is one I ask everybody, and that is, what can you tell us about reverse learning? What is it that you've learned in San Lucia that you can bring back here to Montana?
Okay. So as far as the insurance piece, the one upside of the tourist industry is they are starting to insure their people, and they actually often have nurses who work at the resorts for the employees. So the government, any government worker has health insurance too. So the trick is getting employed. I mean, if you can get employed, that's helpful. At the National Hospital, they won't turn you away if you can't pay, and that's true at St. Jude's also. Only Tapion, I mean, that's cash up front. At St. Jude's, you have to pay up front for outpatient care, but if you have to come in as an emergency or if you're an inpatient, they won't kick you out for lack of resources, but that's not really sustainable for the entity itself, but that's what they do. And as far as what have I learned here, it's probably harkened me back to when I started being a doctor, where we didn't do a test for everything. We used clinical judgment. We didn't spend all of our time worrying about the lawyers and your charges, sort of back to basics, which for me is really just kind of getting people's story and trying to figure out, what's going on with them and how I can, what advice I can give them that's going to work in their life. I think often patients are skeptical. People think, oh yeah, you go over there and everybody's going to be so happy and grateful that you're there. Well, people are skeptical that an outsider really might not get it. And that's the advantage of going back over time, because as time goes on, I don't make suggestions to them about food that I know are unrealistic. I try to sort of find out, well, what are you eating now? And could you do this instead? Because there's no point in me either here or there telling people to do stuff that they can't do or don't want to do.
That's great.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks again, Lisa.
Thanks for your attention.